Real-life documentaries are as much acknowledged as the entertainment side of the film world on the Ultimate Movies broadcast show. Today's feature interview guest, Mark Saxenmeyer, is the executive director of both the Reporters Inc. and Sax and the City Productions. Mark, a filmmaker and documentarian, in the past has worked for the Fox Network and KSTP ABC TV. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
This is Lorraine. How are you today?
I'm good.
Now, we're going to look back a bit in your career first. You won an Emmy Award in 2002 for the race relations documentary, The Experiment in Black and White. Before we move on to discuss your current project, could you tell us a bit about the deciding factors for doing The Experiment in Black and White?
Well, I was a reporter in Chicago for a long time, prior to that in California and Connecticut and Madison, Wisconsin. And the older I got, the more I realized that race relations didn't seem to be getting any better. And depending on where you lived, they were either hostile or just completely segregated. In Chicago, what was telling is after work, one would go to the L stations, the subway, except it was elevated in Chicago. And, the majority of African Americans were going one direction, therefore standing on one side of the L platform, and the majority of white Chicagoans were on the other side, headed north. So there was a huge just discrepancy that never really was discussed, and I wanted to do something that actually would tackle all the issues that black and white Americans talked about privately, but really didn't talk to each other about, because it would appear to be a politically incorrect conversation, or the fear of being labeled a racist if you're asking something that might offend someone. So the Experiment Black and White utilized reality television style mechanisms such as The Real World and Big Brother, and we sequestered 5 black and 5 white Americans or Chicagoans in a house for a week and essentially had them talk about all the issues that they'd always wanted to discuss but never had. And it wasn't an elimination type show or anything like that. It was a method to get people to really communicate, because if they'd gone home and not lived and eaten and played together as one does in a house, they could just vent to their family members about what was going on. And this way they had to vent to each other. So, we taped everything that happened over the course of the week. We had guest speakers, we had assignments, we had projects, and it culminated into a multi-part series and then a documentary. And probably one of my proudest achievements. Very proud of that project.
Yes,
and if anybody would like to still see it, it is available on DVD.
Okay. Now, and obviously, being politically correct was not important for this documentary, because you wanted to get the real story behind everything.
Correct. Yeah. So we encourage people to really speak honestly, and occasionally people were offended, but you can't get to the truth unless you really dig deep.
That's right. And I have to ask you, how did it feel to win that Emmy presented to you by Maury Povich in New York?
Well, I've won many other Emmys, but there are only regional Emmys. So this was a national Emmy, so it was huge in that respect, and it was completely unexpected. I mean, I was just excited to have been nominated. We went to New York, and I got my first Emmy for Shirley Temple, so that was actually more exciting. But yeah, Maury's a nice guy.
Yeah, well, it's great to be acknowledged in that way nationally, and just sort of like set the future stage for you to continue in such great work in documentaries. What was your experience with network television, and how did it encourage you to go into independent documentary filmmaking? Like, is there a connection?
My experience, wow, that's a loaded question. I mean, obviously, I got paid well for a lot of years, so you can't bite the hand that fed you too hard. But there's limitations when you work for corporations, and you work in local television or national television. I mean, you're essentially fulfilling their mission, and their mission is ratings, and their mission is making money. I mean,
right. But do you feel that
enterprises, but ultimately they're businesses, and so there's a lot of stories that aren't covered as effectively or as deeply, or are ignored or overlooked on television. There's a lot of great print media out there, be it on the web or elsewhere, but that delve into a lot of subjects in an in-depth manner, but not so much on television. So I decided when my time was done with local TV to really do what I'd always wanted to do, and that was create kind of a journalistic entity that I felt was needed. And so our mission with the Reporters Inc. is to cover stories, like I say, underrepresented, ignored, misinterpreted by the mainstream media, but mainly with a social activism kind of nature. We promote social awareness, justice,
Well, we're going there
still
shortly.
remain fair and
Yeah.
objective and impartial. These aren't slanted. They're journalistically
That's
sound.
right.
We follow all the caveats of the Society of Professional Journalists, but we go much deeper than I ever could previously.
Well, we're going there shortly with a question about that. But really, working for network television in many ways did prepare you to go independent with documentaries.
Did it prepare me? Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things you learn throughout the course of your career, no matter what you're doing, that you only could have learned through experiences. So,
right, and that you can apply
to.
to.
There's a lot of things I learned legally. There's a lot of things I learned ethically. There's a lot of things I learned journalistically through all the jobs I had prior to this, which really set the stage for what I'm doing now.
Like all things that could be applied to your current work. Now, what especially appeals to you about the documentary format as opposed to like another kind of presentation?
Well, we live in this age, it appears, where everything's getting smaller and shorter. I was just reading something the other day by a journalist in USA Today who was saying he was learning Snapchat, and he was Snapchatting events, just like people are live tweeting. And to me, none of that means anything. It's all disposable nonsense. It's nothing in context. There's no meaning derived from it. There's no insight. There's no perspective. So I don't see the point of it. I just find it to be sensory overload. What I do find is needed is in-depth, thoughtful reporting that actually, is complete. So with documentaries, you don't just tell what happened once. You tell what happened from the perspectives of many different people, and you spend the time getting the research down. You spend the time looking for all the meaningful pieces of evidence and video and photography and interviews that will completely tell the story. Now, that might mean you piece together a bunch of Snapchats that someone did, if someone saved them. That could be meaningful in context. But for me, again, the daily grind of television or whatever kind of reporting just became really, really vapid and superficial. And so what we're doing with our projects is, we're really uncovering everything we can. We take the time to do it. So by the time we release it, we're extremely proud of it.
Right, and the documentary format especially answers the questions that people may have. Because I notice, for example, in our major network news reporting, but then, the listener, the viewer, is left wondering, well, what happened here or what happened with that person, right? So the documentary format allows you, like as you say, to go like in depth, really examine the most important things about a situation.
I believe so, absolutely. And there's a definite market for it. There's a lot of venues for it. I can't even watch the local nightly news and national news anymore because the stories just get shorter and shorter, and the sound bites get shorter and shorter. And when you're done watching a report, as you just said, you're left with so many questions.
Yeah.
And to me, it's all about making money and appealing to a younger demographic. It has nothing really to do with journalism.
Okay, and then you've mentioned a little bit of this already, but we're wondering here, why and how did the Reporters, Inc. originally come together, and is the basic format and concept still the same as when it was first created?
We were granted nonprofit status in 2005, early 2005, and it's a long process, and back then, this was before nonprofit journalism was really a thing. So it took a while to convince the IRS to give us the nonprofit status, actually. There were a lot of hoops you have to jump through. But back then, the idea came out of doing the experiment Black and White that we previously discussed, and its predecessor, which was the experiment Gay and Straight, which used the same concept but for gay-straight relations. And at that point, the media landscape was changing. The internet was becoming big. More people were gravitating towards that. They were leaving TV news. They've never really come back. And I just thought, oh my gosh, my stories on television keep getting shorter and shorter even back then, and this isn't what I want to do. So I set up the framework for the Reporters, Inc. to really make it come to fruition when my time in local TV news was over. And, like I said earlier, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. So as long as they were willing to renew my contract, that was fantastic. When it wasn't renewed in 2010 in Chicago, I decided to pursue the Reporters full time, but we were still in the midst of the recession, and people weren't donating money to hungry children, much less a nonprofit journalism entity. So then I moved home to Minneapolis. My parents are elderly now, and I'm an only child, so I felt it was best to move home. And I still am in Minneapolis, love Minneapolis, and took a job with ABC here, and that clinched my future because that didn't go well. That was a disaster on many levels. I do adhere now to that theory. You can't go home again. You can't
That's
go
right.
backwards.
That's right.
So you always have to move your life forward. So
Right. But
the
it's
last
still,
2 years
yeah.
we've really moved forward with
Right.
the reporter. So it's essentially the same construct as it was, focusing on the documentaries, but we have expanded. We do long-form journalistic written pieces, investigations, commentaries, book excerpts online, and we also do video storytelling services for other nonprofits and folks who have other worthy causes or organizations they want to promote that fit our mission, and that brings a revenue stream in that helps us with the other aspects.
Right. Now, so Black and White did become your flagship, so to speak, and all your other history has sort of led you to that next opportunity of continuing to do what you love, which is to make documentaries. So, and I was reading your organization's mission statement, and it's very admirable, like where you purpose that the truth will be told without compromise to achieve an objective documentary. And you've already basically explained why it's so important to hold such standards for your topics and issues. Like, it almost seems like documentaries are becoming so popular because of that very standard that you meet. One of your current projects is the documentary The Innocent Convicts, that deals with wrongful convictions and examines court cases that never should have reached that level in the judicial system. What made the Reporters Inc. decide to produce that particular documentary?
Well, this one came to us from a young filmmaker in Texas. He's a student at Texas Tech University. He's a Nigerian immigrant, Asi Okurowa, and he wanted to make this documentary about Tim Cole, who was a student at Texas Tech as well in the 1980s, who was wrongfully convicted of rape and then ended up dying in prison before DNA could clear him. It's a tragic story, but it changed the face of wrongful convictions in Texas, changed a lot of laws. Tim Cole became the first man posthumously exonerated in Texas and was pardoned by Governor Rick Perry. So Asi, really wanted to tell his story, but he didn't have the platform or the infrastructure to do it. So he reached out to us and said, "Can you help?" And at the time we were working on some other things, but part of what we do is to help other people who have a voice but don't know how to use that voice tell those stories. So, we met Asi, we completed filming on the Tim Cole story, and then we talked about it and decided we needed to expand the vision of that to include cases throughout the United States that highlight different factors and causes of wrongful convictions.
It's like you just know when you have to pursue something.
You kind of do.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe in that old cliche, things happen for a reason, and the universe brings you to those who you're meant to be with for whatever reason. And the minute Asi came to us, it's kind of like, this needs to be a front burner project.
Right, don't put that one on the back burner.
Right.
So with the Innocent Convicts, not only is it primarily to raise awareness about issues of collecting, processing, and presenting evidence, but there's also definitely the moral aspect of how wrongful convictions have devastating effects on those unjustly accused and charged. So after Tim Cole, you came across other cases?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million cases. Ever since we started promoting the fact we're working on this project, I get emails or texts or Facebook messages or tweets every day from folks with amazingly horrific stories to tell, and we can only include so many. Again, like I say, we're trying to include cases that kind of highlight the different reasons for wrongful convictions. In the Tim Cole case, there's a lot of factors at work there: witness misidentification, police lineup problems, prosecutorial misconduct, racial injustice. There's a lot you can point to there. Others involve different aspects, such as faulty medical evidence or perjured testimony. There's a list of probably 10 key factors. So we're profiling, for example, a case here in Minnesota of a man who was accused of killing his baby by throwing the child against a wall, and it turns out the injury had nothing at all to do with that, because that didn't happen. The child fell from a shopping cart 2 weeks earlier, and the medical evidence presented at trial just misspoke to the truth. So he was exonerated when the Innocence Project of Minnesota got involved and could show from various other medical experts what really happened. There's a case in Wisconsin that's similar in terms of the shaken baby syndrome and how so many women and caretakers and men were convicted of this predominantly in the 90s when it became kind of a thing. And new research and evidence has shown in recent years, it isn't so much the thing they thought it was, and shaken baby syndrome doesn't happen the way the original medical examiners and autopsies and coroners were saying. Then there's a case we're also doing of several men who were convicted of killing a coworker at a paper mill, and one of them has been exonerated, and the others still sit in prison. There's been a renewed effort to bring the truth out there, and that again, depending on who you talk to, causes, according to those who have followed the case, clearly police misconduct and prosecutorial misconduct.
Right, and then including...
We'll be interviewing those folks accused, to find out what their take on this is. The goal with the documentary isn't just to show, look at all these exonerees, and isn't this a sad story? We want to include cases where the outcome is uncertain, to give viewers a sense of how complicated it is if someone believes they have been wrongfully convicted and is trying to convey their innocence. It's extraordinarily hard to reverse convictions, and depending on the state, the standards vary. So we just want to give people not only an idea of how they occur, but how difficult it is to actually get your freedom once you've been convicted.
That's true.
This is something that can happen to anyone. The cases we're showing are black people, white people, women, men, old, young, rich, poor. People don't think that it could happen to them. I never thought it could happen to me. I'd covered these cases before, but I was always like, well, that wouldn't happen to me. I'm not like those guys. But the cases we're including, hopefully everyone who watches will realize, you know what, I totally connect to that guy or that woman or that person, because this can happen to you. It really can.
Right, and when with evidence, when they should have split hairs like they really should have, instead of just like overlooking or just letting a pass on something, there really has to be a more concentrated effort to make sure that everything submitted and presented, for trial, like, is worthy to go there. But
well, absolutely, and there is human error. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes, no matter how competent a cop or a prosecutor or a judge you might be. There are going to be mistakes made. You might have had a bad day. Your mother might be dying. You're going through a divorce. You missed something. But what I'm finding when we do this research is how so many in law enforcement and the criminal justice system just dig in their heels when they think they're being challenged. There's a lot of tunnel vision in terms of, I spent 2 years bringing this case to court, prosecuting this case, and I was right. And no matter what you say,
that's right.
It doesn't matter. I don't want my career tarnished. I don't want my legacy tarnished. I don't want my success rate ratio challenged. The amount of ego.
Yes, it's the ego at the expense of truth. Really.
Exactly.
How close are you to completing the Innocent Convicts documentary? And
good question, Lorraine. We're aiming for a false completion. We have, we want to include, as I say, a good variety of stories, and we have, I think, 3 of them pretty much completed, and now we're shooting at least 2 more, probably 3 more. So right now, it's a matter of finishing the shooting, and then you have to weave the story together based on what you shot. And we're also seeking out archival footage of a lot of these cases from local television stations. We don't pay for footage, so we're reliant on what they donate. We have to we file a lot of freedom of information requests from the courts, prisons, and the police departments that investigate these cases initially, so we don't miss anything. There's a lot of steps you go through to make sure, as I said earlier, that your stories are told completely, that you get both sides. We reach out to everybody possible in the case to give them the opportunity to give us their side of the story. A lot of them, do not respond or choose not to, but at least we've made that attempt, and we can tell viewers that every effort was made to get every side of the story.
Right, and then once the Innocent Convicts documentary is completed, then its real journey can begin. Other Reporters Inc. projects have been aired in film festivals, on public TV, and in schools. Your website mentions a commitment from PBS to nationally broadcast the documentary. So that will still, that's
the plan. What we did was we sought out letters of intent or support from PBS stations around the United States, which essentially help you raise money. Because I think, a lot of people are like, why should I donate to this project? Where will it be seen? Will it ever be seen? Is it going to go to some obscure film festival in Nebraska and it'll never get to my town? So to me, it's pointless to create something and then not have it seen. So the PBS route is a prestigious one. It's an easily accessible one, and we have a commitment, I think, from 13 stations, and we stopped at that because there
Sure.
and whatnot. So the goal is that with that amount of support behind it, ultimately it'll go out. It'll either be picked up nationally through one of PBS's distribution outlets, or it'll go independently to each station and air at a different time. We haven't ruled out the film festival route yet, because again, that gets you even more exposure. The beauty of working on your own when you create something like I created with the Reporters Inc., because you don't have to follow anybody else's footprint. You don't have to follow anybody's guide plan. You just go where your heart and your soul take you. And for this project, we obviously want it to be seen by as many places as possible, and we just don't want to compromise integrity along the way. So I'm very cognizant about how it'll be seen, and if anybody wants to try to alter it and that kind of thing.
Well, it can only grow from here, really. How much of an effect do you feel the documentary could have on current practices for forensic handling of evidence, racial stereotyping, law enforcement procedures, and perhaps on influencing stricter protocols for submission of physical evidence and testimony in pretrial and court case scenarios?
Well, I'm not going to be presumptuous and think it will have an impact on any of that. It would be nice if it does.
Yeah.
And I think the way that you do have that impact is multi-layered. It's got to be a story that resonates with people. It's got to be compelling. It's got to be well told, but it also has to have a takeaway. You see a lot of shows on TV about folks who might have been wrongfully convicted, but they're presented and they're edited more in an entertainment style. And it's one thing to be entertaining, but you also have to be informative. So again, we're going to tell these stories of these folks, but in the end, we want people to realize what went wrong and to understand what went wrong and what's being done or not being done to change the laws. With that Making a Murderer, Netflix, it's gotten a lot of attention. People are debating whether or not the key players are guilty or not, but the big takeaway from that whole show, whether you agree with how they filmed it or what their techniques or methods were, is that it's shown a bright light on all of the problems in the criminal justice system, the issues that led perhaps to wrongful convictions in the case of these two men, regardless of whether or not they were innocent. So again, our point with this in the end is that there'll be a takeaway for folks to springboard into action, and to further that, we want this to be utilized as kind of an educational tool for schools, for workplaces, for religious venues, for whoever feels that by showing this, it can get the dialogue moving forward.
Right, and to open the doors for discussion and to maybe making some real change.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
So Mark, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today, helping us to better understand the dilemma and tragedy of wrongful conviction. I hope your documentary will make a huge difference, open some eyes, and encourage a dedication to truth in a broken system that needs some heavy-duty repairing. And I'm glad that your voice and your project is going to be a part of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your interest. And if folks want to learn more, they can always go to our website at www.thereporters.org. We have a whole page devoted to the Innocent Convicts as well as our other projects and everything we do, and we welcome people's input. So if they want to write us or call us, please do.
Yeah, and we'll include a link on our Show 2 Facebook post so that people can also arrive at your page there.
Yeah,
I should say pages.
Page
yeah.
and Innocent Convicts page.
And I look forward to speaking with you again in April to update us and also to welcome Joan Treppa, who refers to herself as a citizen advocate for wrongfully convicted people. As a team member of the Innocent Convicts documentary, she'll be sharing some stories about those who need a voice to help reveal the truth and right the wrongs of their convictions.